Hey, friends, welcome back to Notes to My Nervous System, a podcast about understanding your nervous system so you can move through hard moments with a little more calm and a lot less self blame. I'm Erin, a mom, a therapist, and creator of the Mind Circuit app. It's a simple nervous system friendly tool for moments when your body needs support before your brain can catch up. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, a teacher here in Asheville, North Carolina. We are talking with Miss Jennifer Corbett, a highly recognized and experienced national board teacher who has been a teacher of the year previously and has 20 plus years working as a teacher, especially within the field of mathematics. She loves middle school and she believes that everyone can do math. Her passion lies in transforming doubt into discovery and helping individuals realize their true capabilities within the subject. In this episode, we explore anxiety, especially anxiety within a math class, how your nervous system can be startled, react, and have yourself go into fight, flight, freeze, all because of the times table, which I know personally was always difficult for me to do. We discuss that profound impact of the nervous system regulating and dysregulated and the impact it has on the ability for one to be in a classroom connecting and learning. It's incredible how much our body can interact and hijack us even in a math class. Tune in as we discuss practical strategies to build a safe and supportive learning community. Strategies, tools, techniques that can be applied in any profession in life. For joining Notes to My Nervous System, I'm Erin, a mom, a therapist, and creator of the Mind Circuit app. And today we are joined by Jennifer Corbett, a highly experienced math teacher who's been in the field since the 2000s.
Yeah, 25 years.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Thanks.
It's exciting. You don't meet a lot of educators who have been in the field for 25 years and also are as passionate about their subject. How do you get that passion going, especially with math? I don't know what it is, but especially middle school and girls. Suddenly they hit middle school, they're in math, and it's nothing but negativity and anxiety.
Yeah.
Do this, it's too hard for me. Math is my subject. I know my own daughter said that, and then she'd bring home an A. And it's like,
Yes.
that doesn't add up.
Right.
What are
Yeah.
you noticing, and how do you keep motivated?
Yeah. So one thing I do, I really try hard to look at my group of kids different each year, right? Because every group of kids is different. So the same way I treated a student last year that had anxiety, well, their anxiety might be coming from somewhere totally different than the student I have this year. Sometimes it's outside pressure, with very caring and loving ways. Sometimes families put a little extra pressure. I would agree, especially on girls. I did it to my own daughter. I wanted her to be independent. I wanted her to be able to work in the world and do all those things. So I pushed her harder to a point where we did have a conversation. And she said, I'm okay and you're okay. Just back off a little bit, and I was grateful that she was able to do that, but not every kid is able to do that. So, and then I also try to stay really informed of different strategies. I'm not a laminate my lesson plan and be done teacher. What I did last year, I'm going to list it and I'm going to look at it and plan on it, but it might need to look different for this year's group of kids. So that's something I try to do to stay kind of fresh. As far as anxiety goes, because I teach 8th grade, by the time they get to me, so many students, girls and boys, immediately say, I'm good in math or I'm bad in math. And I think that's because they've been in math so long. Yeah, it's just straight. And so one thing I do is I talk about how I also struggled in math. And that's why I'm a math teacher. I was not one who got math really quickly. I was not one who can solve problems fast, things like that. And I talk about how that doesn't make me bad at math. It just means I take a little longer than someone else, and that's okay. So I start to try and break the stigma of what they think a mathematician is. What I have figured out is that students have a perception of what a mathematician is. They think that mathematician is the person who does the most work on their paper, or they think the mathematician is the person who answers the question the fastest. Things like that have nothing to do with the skill of math. And so I talk to them about that. I talk to them about every mathematician looks different, and it's okay to look different as you're doing math. We might do it in different ways. I teach many, many standards in the 8th grade, and I only have 2 that I require them to do it the way I do it. The rest of it, they can sometimes do it the way I do it, but if they can prove to me that they know how to do it and justify it and use it consistently, I accept it. And I think that's very eye opening to them. I think they're very used to this is the structure. So I think that's a big part of it. And then I spend a lot of time saying, you can do this. It's okay. Let's make mistakes. Let's try and demonstrating mistakes. I make mistakes in math all the time while I'm teaching, and not on purpose, right? The kids will be like, you just multiplied that wrong. I'm like, oh gosh, I got distracted. I forgot, and so I think it's important for them to see that doesn't mean I'm not good at math. That means I made a mistake and it's okay.
Do you think that's where some of that mental health, anxiety, that nervous system fight, flight, freeze comes in? That idea of I can't make a mistake?
Absolutely. Yeah. And because I think they've seen if they make a mistake in the beginning, by the end, it's
Oh,
wrong.
yeah.
Right? And so I also will take time and say, okay, let's look back at your work and let's find the mistake. Okay, you knew the process. You knew exactly what you were supposed to do. You just accidentally said that 3 times 3 was 6 instead of 9. And so really helping them see it wasn't that they didn't know what they were doing. It was that they made a simple math mistake and it's easy to fix. But they just look at the end result, right? I missed this problem versus why did I miss the problem?
I think that goes into some of that critical thinking too.
Mhm.
You look at whatever you're working on in life and be able to say, okay, well, this piece is wrong, but what else is correct? Where can I pivot? Where can I learn? And I don't know about you, but when people are overwhelmed and that lid is flipped and they're just reactive, it's like you can't grasp that idea.
No, yeah, once you're in it, it's too hard to see what's
Mhm.
around you. Yeah, right, you can't see what the forest for the trees, is that the saying, And I definitely take time when I see a student getting to that frustration point because you can see it on a kid's face.
How do you felt that? What does it look like to you?
So, in girls in particular, a lot of them will cry. And that's just, I think, emotions. And I talk about that's not weakness, but that's, I think, an instinct of like our stress comes out that way. Some of them will shut down. You'll see that they were talking to their group, they were engaged in class, and now all of a sudden they're just sitting very quiet and very withdrawn. Some will ask to like leave the class. Can I go to the bathroom? Can I go get water? And I've been watching and I'll see how they've been working at the same problem for 5, 10 minutes. And now they're asking for a break, which is actually very healthy. And so when I see that frustration on them, I I take the math out of it. That's my goal. I say, okay, take a break. You're done. I don't want you to work on this problem anymore. I want you to go to this problem. Or I don't want you to worry about that one. We'll finish it tomorrow. Because when you're in that fight or flight, you're not going to see anything. No matter how much I talk to you, no matter how much I show you, you're not ready to listen. And because your body's not ready. And I think that's important. And so I talk to them about that. I can see you're frustrated. It's okay to walk away for a minute and come back at it. And the best I can do is compare it to what I do, right? Like when I get frustrated, this is what I do. And so I try to tell them, I listen to music, I walk away, or things like that. When I get overwhelmed with schedules, I make lists and I have to organize myself. And so I say, well, is there anything we can organize with this? Because I also find the root of their frustration is not always the math. It's usually that pressure they're putting on themselves, right? And with the math comes the volleyball game or the basketball game or the this or the that or whatever's going on or their friendships because it's middle school, right? They're constantly changing. So allowing them the space to recognize that and then come at it and retry.
All in math, and it's the math class.
Yes. Yeah. Which is the hard part, right? And honestly, I don't catch them all, right? And that's why they're friends, other teachers, parents. I mean, people talk about, the team. It's true. Like I can't do it alone. And I need parents to email me and say, Jennifer was really struggling with this so that I can say, oh, that means I need to do something for her. Things like that. I have had friends come to me, like actual peers that'll say, I think that Jennifer's really frustrated with this and she's not getting it the way you teach it. And I have to be vulnerable enough to be able to say, okay, then I need to come at it a different way. And that's how I help the students, right? It's not about me.
That going 25 years. I mean, isn't there a part of you that wants to rev up and go, I know what I'm doing?
No, there probably should be. I am very confident that I'm a great teacher, but I also know that I don't learn from every single person and the way they talk to me. And so sometimes I might not be their person. And I'm lucky enough to have a colleague that also teaches the same content and the same topic that sometimes I say, "Do you want to sit in her class tomorrow? And do you want to see how she's talking about it? And maybe hearing it from her will help you." And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And in the world of technology, which can be frustrating, luckily we have so many resources. I can find 4 different videos on what I'm teaching, and I can say, why don't you watch these videos and see if that perspective helps you a little bit differently? I had in particular, it's a boy, not a girl, but last year he was very stuck on factoring quadratics, which already those words like freak people out, right? Yeah. And so I sat down with him and I said, "Show me what you're doing." And he was doing something completely different than what I had shown in class. And it took me about 2 days to figure out how he was doing it and where his mistake was so that then he could use that strategy, but correctly. But he was so patient with me, and I just kept telling him, "I'm gonna get this for you. Like, be patient with me." And I think that's important for them to see that I'm willing to do that. I'm 47 years old, teaching 25 years and still learning, right? It's not a be all end all.
How did you I worked in education back in the day in Chicago public schools, and I ended up leaving. I was burnt being a counselor of my first school was like 350, 400 kids, and it was one of me. And then I went to another school, and the school in our neighborhood closed. And so we had all their kids joined my school, and all of a sudden there was 1,200
Wow.
who didn't like each other because they were from separate schools
Right.
and one of me. And I'm
Yeah.
so burnt. And that was 10 years, and you're 25 years.
Mhm.
What helps you keep that level headed, calm reaction? Because I know my nervous system was constantly activated when I was in the schools.
Yeah. I worked with a counselor, gosh, it must have been like 23 years ago cuz she was at my first school. And I asked her that same question. We would talk constantly and I said, "How do you not take all this home with you? How do you not lose sleep at night?" And she gave me this metaphor that I've always used still of as she walks out to her car, she just slowly says, "I'm going to put this thing down. I'm going to put this thing down. I'm going to put this thing down. I'm going to put this thing down." And then when she comes back into the school, she says, "I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to pick it up." And just mentally saying, I'm going to remove from here so I can come back refreshed and pick it back up. It doesn't mean I'm giving up on it. It doesn't mean I'm stopping. It just means I'm letting myself have that refresh that I need so I can come back and do what I need. So I guess my answer to that would be just mentally separating myself. I've always, I think, had a blessing of driving about 20 plus minutes to my job, which I used to think was a bad thing. But now that 20 to 30 minutes is a great decompression time for me. Like I arrive home separated and it really makes a big difference. The other piece is colleagues. I rely on my colleagues to be honest with me when I'm getting to that point cuz I get there, right? We all have our days. The students know that. Like the students can see the days that I'm revved up. They can see the days that my nervous system is not doing well. And they respond to that most of the time positively because I've built a relationship, right? But about 10 years ago, I went to a professional development that talked about being vulnerable with students and being honest with them. And so I have started coming into my class and going, "Listen, guys, today has not been my day. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm off. I'm frustrated. I just need you to know that so that whatever happens in class, it's not really about you. And if you could help me out." And that vulnerability is amazing because they respond to it. Then they are more cautious with me and they are more gentle with me that day. And sometimes I have kids that'll come up to me and be like, "Miss Corbett, are you okay today? Like, are you having one of your days?" And I can't take offense to that, right? I can't be defensive. I have to say, okay, that means I'm responding to them in some weird way, that they're picking up on it. So I think that being vulnerable and being willing to allow my students and my colleagues to come to me and say, "Take a breath," is really helpful. Just like I want to do with the kids, right? Like I want to have that for myself. If I'm going to preach it, I need to practice it. And having colleagues to speak with. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, though, that's very difficult, especially when you're the adult and there's 20 plus kids, 30 plus kids.
Yeah.
To be able to be vulnerable and not worry that you're going to lose control of the classroom is what I hear a lot from especially new teachers.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I would say that that's what happened when I was younger, right? I mean, it takes time to learn, just like for the students. And I think seeing myself as a learner
Mhm.
versus a professional, I am a professional, but professionals have to learn. And a lot of the things I talk to my students about, I try to practice as well. So when I say, when you're feeling overwhelmed, take a break. Okay, well, then that means that's what I need to do. And if I'm not seeing it because I'm in fight or flight, I trust the people around me to say, do you need to take a step back for a minute and not get defensive? Or if I do get defensive, we've had that relationship long enough that I can come back to them and go, that was not about you. And they know that, and I can do the same for them. But that comes with trusted colleagues. And if you don't have that and you haven't found that person, then it's really hard.
So you model it for the kids, you give them the language,
Yes.
take the breaks and show them that it's okay. You
Mhm.
show them mistakes and you keep moving forward. And it sounds like though being in the field as long as you have been is actually a benefit.
It has been. Yeah, because I think I've.
Hump because we're
Sorry.
lo how did you get over the hump? Because
Mhm.
so many educators are leaving the field.
Yeah. So one thing I've always done, even since I had like part-time jobs, is I am committed to a job 100%. But when I feel myself pulling away from that job or not feeling connected to it, I change. And when I was at part-time jobs, that was pretty simple, right? I'm going to go from the Disney store to the Hallmark store or whatever. But what I did in education was I changed up what I was doing, right? So, for example, I taught sixth grade math for about 16 years. Loved it, loved the structure, loved the routine, but I was feeling myself get in that rut, right? I was feeling myself start to disconnect, start to be on automatic pilot. And so I changed it up, and I actually did 5 years at a private school and taught science and religion for 5 years. And it was an amazing experience. And I learned a lot there too. Then I came
Mhm.
back and I had a choice of where do I want to apply? And I thought, let's go older. Let's try eighth grade. Like I have found that middle school is my jam. I'm definitely a middle school teacher, but changing up what I'm doing really makes a difference. And being willing to do that, I think that's what I would say to younger teachers, because there are a lot of experienced teachers, myself included, sometimes that when you go to a training or you go to something, they're sitting there going, I already know this. I don't need this. I already heard this. It's the same thing they told us 10 years ago. Right. And so they're hearing that negativity from other colleagues. But what I would suggest for newer teachers is to go into it with, what can I walk away with today? And yeah, they heard it 10 years ago, but you didn't. Right. Or it's the same thing they've heard before, but that's not what you've heard before. Right. And so really trying to not let those negative Nancy's influence how you receive information, because all around us as teachers, there's constant strategies, constant ways. And I think what I try to do at every professional development I go to is walk away with something I could use the next day. And I don't need to do everything I just heard in this 8 hours. I need to walk away with something I can do the next day. And that could be as simple as greeting students at the door. And I haven't been doing that. Like I have little things that I do in my classroom that I've picked up from trainings, and I can't remember everything from that training, but I remember the training that taught me, when you're taking attendance, if you have to look for the child, that means you didn't greet them that day. And I remember that. And every time I take attendance, I remember that. You know, I can't even tell you what training that came from, but it made me a better teacher because I use it. So I think it's just being open and not letting negative opinions influence you. So that's my suggestion to younger teachers, is being willing to hear and being willing to try.
Is that in any profession, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. And I think knowing that you're new is hard, because right, you want to come in, you want to prove yourself, you want to show that you know what you're doing, and that's great, but also recognizing I still have learning to do, right? I still have things to grow. And I think being open to that is important.
Do you find talking about it and saying it out loud when you're modeling it for the kids help you as well, especially in that anxiety?
Definitely. Yeah, I think because I'm a verbal processor, in case you can't tell by how much I talk. But I think being able to say those things out loud and hear myself allowed me to recognize more about it. And seeing the students' responses to me when I don't talk about that has
Mhm.
really helped me too, right? The days when I do try and keep it together, but then I lose it. because it happens. I'm human. And so seeing those days versus the days where I am vulnerable with the kids and say, I'm not having a great day, they're two different days. And the way the kids respond to me is very different. And I think that's important to recognize.
What responses are you picking up that are different?
So I build a lot of community in my classroom. I try really hard to make it a family. I always talk to them about how we spend more time together during the school year awake than we do with our families at home during the school year. Like, if you really count the hours, they're with us a lot longer than they're at home. And so we need to be a family, and that's important. And so when I'm teaching, for example, on the days when I'm having a bad day and I don't want to admit it because I'm prideful, and I start looking out at my classroom and I see a lot of students starting to retreat, right? I see a lot of big eyes when I start say something. Or if I get to the point, unfortunately, where I haven't regulated myself and I do say something a little harsher to a student, I hear it, right? And then that student responds either very negatively because I've backed them into a corner, or they respond with a big eyed look of like, she's never talked to me that way. And that's like my wake up call, of like their facial expressions are just totally different than when we usually interact. Whereas when I'm vulnerable and say, I just had a really rough first block, second block, I need your help, I hear some of them say things like, do you want me to do the warm up? Or they'll say, what's going on, Miss Corey? Do you want to talk about it? Like, and I can't talk about it with kids a lot, but they are very kind. And, or they'll say, I always have at least one kid in every class that notices and will say, I hope your day gets better, Miss Corbett. And that makes a big difference to me because it shows that I've built that relationship with them, that they know this isn't me every day. But it takes me being vulnerable. I know I keep saying that, but I have to be willing to do that.
Important piece. Vulnerability
Yeah.
absolutely forces people to be honest, to grow, to change, to connect. And that doesn't always happen in the school setting, in the work setting in general. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
You be vulnerable and recognize that it's not a weakness.
Right. That it doesn't mean I can't do my job. And I think that also comes from the times I have done my job well. It's been recognized by students, by parents, by colleagues, by administrators. I have that also. I think that's a hard piece for students. Not every student has a structure of support that I have, right? So when they do get defeated, that defeat is strong. And so I think it's important for me to be a part of that uplifting, and give that confidence because I have that support system telling me you did this well and you did this well and you did this well, but you messed up here. And I'm okay with that because I did these other things well. Some students don't have that, right? Some students go from home to school to home and just hear, you did wrong, you did wrong, you did wrong, you did wrong. And I think it's important to recognize the strengths, even if it's not math skills, right? If we're, focusing on math, if I don't recognize the positives that they do already, and see them as a person and their strengths, they're never going to try math for me. So, the first 6 weeks of my class, we're doing math. We start straight, but I also spend a lot of time praising, spend a lot of time saying, I really love the way you're taking those notes today. That's amazing. So that they know there are strengths because then when they're having the rough day, they can fall back on that. And I think that's important for the vulnerability piece.
Impressed. You are saying all the mental health things that I've been telling people for so kudos and thank you for being so aware of not only your own mental health, but your students, because that is so very important. Did you start out with this mentality? Was it pieces along the way? Was there a aha moment, the switch? This is not normally 25 years in, and I'm super happy peppy and excited about vulnerability for any profession, let alone teaching.
Right. Yeah. I've always been very lucky to have a great support system. My family is very supportive. My husband's very supportive. So I've always had that, which is a blessing. So I think that helped me to build an ability to look back at myself. But I'm also very internally critical of myself. And I know that. And I did not use this vulnerability in the beginning of my career. In the beginning of my career, every mistake I made felt huge. right? I just let this kid down, or we worked so hard on this test. Why can't they get it? And what am I doing wrong? Versus now I can see, what am I doing wrong? But also, how can I help this kid with the background skills? It comes with age, right? But I have always been blessed to have that support system that helped me. And I think that's huge. I think without that, I don't know if I would have stayed as long as I did, to be honest. And I try very hard to be a support system for new teachers because of that. I remember what it was like to feel lost and to be confused, and that you went to college and you learned a lot, but you didn't learn the ins and outs, right? Which I think comes with any career, right? I always said there should be a class in college called crap. That's just like all the things that you need for your profession that aren't in a class, right? How to unjam a copier without kicking it. Things like that add to your mental health. So, but I also have always been surrounded with strong teachers. I find the teacher in the school that you can tell is a strong teacher, loves their career, and has systems. And I picked up on that, and I found that person. And I said, okay, I'm going to make this person my mentor, whether they know it or not.
Have to say, it sounds like mentorship has been a huge plus for you as you've navigated.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I would go into their classroom and say, okay, I'm having trouble with this seating arrangement. What would you do? Right. Or I would even just see their board and how they laid out their agenda for the day. And I would be like, that's so much easier than what I'm doing for my kids, things like that. But finding that teacher is important, and I didn't walk in and be like, okay, you're going to be my mentor. This is it. I just kept the conversation open. And teachers that are willing to be mentors, and that they're happy to do that. It feels like you're imposing, but you're not. Like, anyone who loves their job is happy to talk about it and happy to help someone else. So just, again, be vulnerable and go ask that person. I think that's important.
Well, this has been a lovely conversation. I really appreciate all of this. Before we wrap up, what's one small thing that a teacher or a student can do to help themselves when they're in that classroom, whether it's math or English, and their nervous system's overwhelmed and they're in fight, flight, freeze, and that anxiety is just awful. And I don't know about you, but internally I would be like, just push harder, just push harder. And that never works.
No, and that was my strategy for a long time, because on the outside, you're always going to look great and put together, but on the inside, it's a hot mess, right? And it takes a lot to accept that and to be able to go, okay, my hot mess is coming out. So my advice would be to try to recognize the symptoms of that anxiety coming, right? Because there are signs, right? You can feel your nervous system tensing up. You can feel your brain start to rev up. And so trying to recognize that within your nervous system so that then you can catch it before it gets too big, right? Because that's the other piece of our nervous system. Our nervous system is going to respond to our external, right? And so, like, if I start to feel myself, my heart's beating faster, my brain's going fast, I'm tapping my fingers, things like that, I think it's important for me to go, okay, wait, let's take a step back. Let me breathe. Let me do whatever my strategy is. And if I don't have a strategy, then, okay, I'm going to ask somebody, or I'm going to look around and be like, how does that person do it? And so I think learning what calms you down, right? I've never been into deep breathing, but my daughter, she graduated 3 years ago. So probably 7 years ago now, through high school, she had huge anxiety and she would call me with these panic attacks. And the only thing that would bring her down was just breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 4. And I had seen it on a movie. I was like, I don't know what to do, so we're going to try this. And it was her thing. And so now I've learned, take a couple deep breaths, I just have learned things from helping people and from watching. So responding to your nervous system early, if you can, and knowing what your take a break is, knowing what your whew is going to be, whether that's music or journaling or drawing, whatever it is, and do it. I think that's important. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
Very helpful. Thank you very much. And hopefully, anybody who's listening took away a little nugget or two, especially those who are in education or are parents or aunts or guardians and have a kiddo in education, to recognize all the additional skills that it takes to be a teacher, to be in education, and the impact it has on our mental health. We need to
yeah,
have more of these conversations.
definitely. And I think having more of the conversations will take some of the stigma of you have to hold it together all the time out, because that's not the truth. I wouldn't expect my students to hold it together all the time, so why would I expect myself? And I think that's important to recognize.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this, because I know you're on break.
You are welcome. I very much enjoyed it.
Thank you for my listeners. If this spoke to you, please click like and follow. Leave a comment. Unless it's negative, you can keep the negativity to yourself. And as always, please be kind to your own wiring. Thank you again for joining Notes to My Nervous System. If this spoke to you, please leave a review and subscribe. It's the only way people find small, independent podcasts like these. But before you go, let's take one small second. Deep breath in. Let's just notice our body, your feet on the floor, your breath, the chair holding you. Nothing to fix. Just letting your nervous system know it made it through another moment. If this episode helped you feel even a little more steady, that matters. That's what this show is here for. And if you want more of those gentle science-based resets between episodes, you can find my app, Mind Circuit Ease, in the App Store or Google Play. It's a quiet place to help your brain come back online when life feels too loud. Thank you again for being here. Your nervous system deserves care and not pressure.